أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه وسلم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Today, inshallah, we are starting a new topic as a follow-up to previous topic. So for quite some time, we have been studying prophethood. We started with prophethood, then we talked about sunnah, prophetic practices. And inshallah, this week we are starting to talk about hadith, because through narrations, we learn about prophetic practice. And of course, there are like the waters in terms of hadith is a little muddy. And when people doesn't like certain things about hadith, they could say, oh, this is weak, this is fabricated, this is this, this is that. And now that previously we had Google, now we had ChatGPT. So everybody is immediately becoming a hadith scholar by asking to ChatGPT. And if it's a hadith that I dislike, I Google it. I find somebody who says it's weak or this or that, and then comfortably I said, it's gone. Sometimes to the extent that maybe none of them is, I shouldn't be paying attention to hadith at all and whatnot. So this is why it's a area where things are going on. In this third branch of 24th word, which is in page 356 for the hard copy, from the book Words, author is going to give us principles as to how to approach hadith. This is in some sense, technical topic, and it's a little bit of a lengthy text. So inshallah, let's read it together. And as we have questions, comments, we can talk about them. But this, like in our discussion so far, you have noticed that there is a way to approach Quran, and there's a way how not to approach Quran. For example, today when we were studying at Drexel, we talked about a verse which concludes by, indeed, Allah does not guide the disbelievers. One of the brothers, a newly convert brother, raised the question, oh, well, like this sounds a little off. Like if somebody is a disbeliever, then God is never going to guide them. So it looks like a chicken and egg problem. Quran comes for guidance for somebody who doesn't find guidance, and now Creator is saying that I'm not going to give guidance to those who disbelieve. So that's wrong. And then we talked about how Quran should be read. It's a book of guidance. Like you can read it as describing you as a human being, and disbeliever in this case is an attitude. If you are in this stubborn attitude of covering up the truth, the Creator says that if you don't want guidance, I'm not going to give you guidance. Once we read it as such, the verse becomes miraculously beautiful. So likewise, there are ways that once we read hadith, we will either find it like unlikely or whatever, as we will read, but author will give us principles as to how to approach prophetic guidance, because hadith is going to be prophetic guidance. Okay. So let's start with third branch, and we can read maybe, let me see, up to the end of fifth principle. We can read it all at once, and then back and read it. You will read.
Since the hadith that speak of the signs of the end of time, the events at the end of time, and the merits and rewards of certain actions have not been well understood, some scholars who rely on their reason have pronounced some of them to be either weak or false, while some of the scholars whose belief was weak but whose egotism was strong have gone as far as denying. For now we shall not attempt any detailed discussion, but shall only explain 12 principles. First principle. This is a matter which we have explained in the question and answer at the end of the 20th word. Its summary is this. Religion is an examination, a test, which distinguishes elevated spirits from base ones. It therefore speaks of matters that everyone shall see with their eyes in the future in such a way that they remain neither altogether unknown nor self-evident, so that everyone would be compelled to confirm them. They open the door to the reason, but do not take the will from the hand. Because if a sign of the last day appeared completely self-evidently, and everyone was compelled to affirm it, then a disposition like cold would be equal to one like that. The mystery of man's accountability and results of examination would go for nothing. It is because of this that there has been much dispute over matters like that of the Mahdi and Sufyan. Also, the narrations differ greatly. They have become pronouncements which contradict one another. Second principle, there are various levels in the matters of Islam. If one requires certain proof, for another the prevailing opinion is the book. Others require merely assent and acceptance and not to be rejected. In which case, secondary matters or particular events in time, which are not among the bases of belief, do not require certain compliance and definite proof, just not to be rejected and to be submitted to, and not to be interfered with. Third principle, in the time of the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, most of the Jewish and Christian scholars entered Islam, and their former knowledge became Muslim along with them. Some of their former knowledge, which was contrary to the truth, was imagined to be a part of Islam. Fourth principle. Some of the words of the narrators of Hadith, or the meanings they deduced, were considered to be part of the text of the Hadiths themselves. However, since man cannot be free of fault, some of their deductions or words which were contrary to the truth were supposed to be hadiths and were pronounced to be weak. Fifth principle. According to the meaning of among my community are transmitters of hadiths, that is, meaning who are inspired, some of the meanings which were obtained through the inspirations of scholars of related hadiths who followed the path of illumination and sainthood were supposed to be hadiths, whereas due to certain obstructions, the inspiration of saints may be in error. Thus, some that are contrary to the truth may arise from this.
Let's read the sixth principle as well.
Sixth principle. There are certain stories which, having been previously known, have become like proverbs. Their true meanings are not borne in mind. For whatever purpose they were spread, that is what is considered. Thus, some stories and fables which have become well known among people in this way, God's noble messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, told in the form of comparisons and metaphors for the purpose of guidance. If there is any error in the true meanings of this sort of matters, it pertains to the customs and traditions of the people and the way they have been passed among them.
Jazakallah khairan. So the later principles are a little longer, but the first six we read, I think there are going to be 5 or 6 more. 6 more, yeah. There are 12 principles, so we read the first 6. I would like to reread the first paragraph. Since the hadiths that speak of the signs of the end of time, the events at the end of time, and the merits and rewards of certain actions have not been well understood, some scholars who rely on their reason have pronounced some of them to be either weak or false, while some of the scholars whose belief was weak but whose egotism was strong have gone as far as denying them. For now, we shall not attempt any detailed discussion, but shall only explain 12 principles. So the description that's going to be made in here is for people like you and me. Like a well-learned scholar is summarizing, let's say, how to approach hadith for common people like you and me. So this is taken as such. And the underlying idea here is, from certain scholars, we do hear either this is so strong, this is so weak, and author seems to be worried about this, saying that some people are just, if you like, cutting off or destroying many of the hadith just because either they don't understand the idea, what its purpose is, and simply say them either weak or false and reject it altogether. And it's quite common nowadays as well. And sometimes we, as common people, either watch one YouTube video or sometimes just go and Google the hadith and read in a certain forum which says, oh, this hadith is weak or it's mawdu, it's fabricated, and then like easily we can dismiss it. Author is giving us as lay people some opinion as to how to approach the matter. So this is sort of the context of this text. And also, since we have been talking about importance of sunnah so far, and hadith in the first place is an important source of how sunnah is being transmitted. So in general, the idea of hadith being preserved in our perception is important. Like if I see that hadith is something not so reliable, if this is the impression that starts accumulating on me, then I am pretty much chopping off the sunnah, which importance of which we discussed for so many weeks now. So this is why author in here is trying to explain how I should approach hadith and how I should not approach hadith. So if that makes sense so far. Yeah.
I think I understand the momentum to like maybe considering a hadith like maybe weak, not to dismiss it altogether. But I guess I'm still a bit confused about what if we have like a strong hadith? Is that still to be taken as some like, I feel like I see that as something that's taken as absolute truth, like because it's strong, like we should do this.
Yeah. So inshallah, we will talk about these as we go through the principles. We will talk about these questions. But yeah, this is a valid question.
We cannot like dismiss hadith easily because hadith is the like sunnah and we have like the Quran and the sunnah. But I think considering hadith as sunnah, I feel like it should have even more scrutiny about it and not accept it for face value because it's a sunnah. Like I cannot say a hadith and then I don't know, show the prophet in a bad, in a bad image or so. And just because it's a hadith, because it's part of the sunnah, I should take it. But because I think of the sunnah the way, or the prophet the way you're thinking, I shall think that this hadith is not like valid.
Yeah.
So I think the argument stands in both ways. Like because I have the prophet in such a like high image in my head, I wouldn't accept such a hadith from him.
Yeah, and the examples that he will give, for example, like the examples he talked about is, as we will see in the future, he's going to give examples of that too, which on the surface sounds like contradictory. So people then say that, oh, this is made up because it doesn't make sense. So, and at the intro, he is saying that people are arguing because either some scholars rely on their reason, have pronounced some of them to be either weak or false. Like it doesn't make sense, so let's deny this, is one approach. The other approach, he says, some scholar whose belief was weak, but whose egotism was strong, have gone as far as denying them. So sometimes the source of denial is not like what you suggest makes sense, but there's this other form of it which says, like, it doesn't make sense, or it's, I know more, because when the egotism is there, the idea is prophet, an illiterate person, you're saying that this is what he said, so put it aside, I know more. So there's this attitude as well. So now the author is saying that we need to defend hadith because this is what is coming. like in today, what sort of a attack is out there is what we should be focusing on. So in today, is it that because at a certain point, especially like second, third centuries, hadith fabrication was a thing. But today is the problem hadith fabrication or dismissal of hadith? So that's why author is taking a different attitude. Back then, people have been, like scholars have been very scrutinizing. And this is why even very like good intending scholars denied very sound hadith as well, just to be clear and safe. Because at the time, this was the bigger threat. But in this day and age, what is a bigger threat? The bigger threat today is, and this is why he's going to talk about Dajjal a lot in this text, saying that religion is being denied. And also, he is also referring to Sufyan. Sufyan is within Hadith, is Dajjal within Muslim community. Like Dajjal is in the global scale, but then Sufyan is within Muslim community. A hypocritical personality is going to come out. And in other places, he mentions that Sufyan is going to attack prophethood. Dajjal is going to attack belief in God. So in this context, he is saying that our bigger concern is somebody is trying to clean away prophets and prophethood. Actually, this is why we started discussing this topic a few months ago. So then what is the bridge that connects us with the prophet is hadith. So whatever is out there, I would like to make most out of them would be the attitude, rather than being easily dismissive to, I mean, what you made makes sense, and it had been a concern, granted, but today we are not there. Like in this day and age, the threat is coming from the reverse angle, not from fabrication angle. So this is why authors' sensitivity is in a different position. And sometimes we get caught with historical fights, and some scholars are still living in this fight and saying that, oh, we have to be extremely careful. Yes, we need to be extremely careful, but today's problem is not there. So this is why author is not even bringing our attention to there. He is saying that just look elsewhere. As we will see in the following principles, he is going to be highlighting, I guess at the end of the 10th principle, he is going to give a summary saying that, in essence, I'll paraphrase it, if you are not an expert of this matter, don't mess up with it. Like, this is where he's going to bring it to. But we will reread it once we get there. So, and again, this is not a like a scholar speaking to common people. This is not like a hadith professor talking to another hadith professor about usul al-hadith. It's not such a text. In today's world, how am I going to navigate with hadith? And especially today, after ChatGPT, this is even more relevant, because even if I quote a hadith right now, I know at least 2-3 of you will start Googling it, and you will find some forum which says it is mawdu, and then what will happen? I mean, Yusuf is just talking about some fabricated hadith anyways. It's made up anyways. Why shall we discuss about it? Immediately, automatically, this becomes the outcome. And you can find somewhere, some scholar which says mawdu to almost any hadith. So this being the case today, the focus of attention needs to be different. Okay. Yes.
So on top of that, I think there's another way to benefit from this text, because I'm sure there are such people as you described, or sometimes I do, where they have been learned. But I guess the bigger concern, which also relates to our previous discussions, is not whether certain hadith are weak or not, but rather what kind of prophetic image and prophetic guidance I will get from narrations. I guess this is more important than the status of the status.
Soundness.
Yes, soundness, the status of the hadith. Like for most of us, for most of the people, It's not even a matter of concentrations. We just Bukhari or another source of hadith that we taught and we read, that's all. But the point is, you either read it from your imams or some other imam, doesn't matter where you read it, and which hadith you call sound or sound, not sound. It doesn't matter. The matter is, when you read a narration, how you going to extract sunnah out of it, and how you understand it in the light of, again, the prophetic image. Because this is the bigger question, because the narration is not sunnah. Narration is the means that we learn about sunnah. So when narration says the prophet did this or did that, doing this or that is not sunnah. It's what you get out of it, what it means, in what context prophet did it, to explain what, right? What people understood, all these, then you extract the sunnah. So there's a big distinction. And our main concern, I think, when we read this text, shouldn't be about the narration, but should be about the sunnah I get out of it. And these principles, as we read so far, tells of us how to extract this sunnah and how to get rid of the rest. Right? In one principle, for instance, you ought to add, when people narrated these the things, sometimes they also interjected their previous understanding, like a pre-Islamic understanding. So that we should get rid of. Some of the narrators, they also interjected their own interpretation, which is expected from a human transmission. You should also get rid of this. So I think that's the bigger purpose of this text, like at least for us. The author might have written it for any other reason at this time for his audience, but when the audience is us, we should read it as, how am I going to open my trusted book of narration? Right? Doesn't matter what mazhab you are from. Your book of narration is there. You open it. How are you going to benefit from it? On basis of what principles? Because as Yusuf said, when we read Quran, the Quran is just one, except there are some variations. It's whatever. These Orientalists, they love to talk about such variations to prove that it's not any different than any other scripture in terms of this family. Anyway, Quran is fixed, it's there, but still we're talking about some principles to read to benefit Quran. Otherwise, you cannot just read Quran and say that, okay, it is written there, I have to chop heads off unbelievers. You don't do that. You read it within a context and with some principles. Right? Speaking to you to give you guidance the same way, based on some principles, we will read the narrations so that we can extract the sunnah guidance out of it, not take it as its face value.
So I'm quickly rereading the first principle. This is a matter which we have explained in the question and answer at the end of 20th word. Its summary is, religion is an examination, a test, which distinguishes elevated spirits from base ones. It therefore speaks of matters that everyone shall see with their eyes in the future in such a way that they remain neither altogether unknown nor self-evident, so that everyone would be compelled to confirm them. They open the door to the reason, but do not take the will from the hand. That sentence I would like to underline. they open the door to the reason, but do not take the will from the hand. Because if a sign of the last day appeared completely self-evidently and everyone was compelled to affirm it, then a disposition like coal would remain equal to the one like a diamond. The mystery of man's accountability and results of examination would go for nothing. It is because of this that there has been much dispute over many matters like that of Mehdi and Sufyan. Also, the narrations differ greatly. They have become pronouncements which contradict one another. Any comments or questions on this? Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, William. How are you? Alhamdulillah. So we are starting from here. Yes, can we get the microphone?
Or it's just something Rekhan, you said. I'm not sure I understand it. So, problem I'm actually facing is right now, if there is like a weak hadith, so you said take out the principle out of it. But if it's a weak hadith, basically doesn't it mean it's false? It's completely wrong. So how do I take out the principle from something false? Because Quran is the truth. So no matter what I look at it, it's the truth. So taking out the principle makes sense. But something which is false, how do I take out the principle from that? I don't understand that. Sorry, I know you were discussing this, but that was actually coming from.
So, but in terms of the technicality over there, weak doesn't mean false. Weak just means in the narration chain, some either narrator is missing. Mawdu, technically speaking, would be fabricated. But even a hadith being mawdu doesn't mean that the content of the word itself is wrong. It just means that the narration chain never goes to prophets. So the content...
We cannot prove that it goes to prophet.
Yeah. So the content of the sentence does not necessarily need to be wrong either. In terms of attribution, there might be an issue. But other than that, was the word itself wrong? Not necessarily. And Nursi gives an example of that too. And we will see one example of a narration which says, earth is on the oxen and fish. Like there happens to be such a narration. Nursi makes an interpretation of this. In his early days, one interpretation. In his later days, another interpretation on the same topic. His approach is slightly differing for a good reason. And inshallah, when we get there, we should discuss this too. Yeah.
So also, again, like these are the problem, the questions, or let's say the matters that only an expert scholar can answer whether hadith is weak or not. Right? So, and this is not my business. What I mean with this is not my business is that the point is not to save a hadith or another, whether everybody should believe it or not. This is not the point. The point is you have an hadith in front of you that you believe. Okay? You say that, okay, it is probably coming from the Prophet. For this or that reason, you have your reasons. You trust this scholar and you say that, okay, this is coming from the Prophet. How are you going to benefit from this? That's the point. So whether some scholar call it as weak hadith or not, this is not my problem. Like, I don't have expertise to challenge whether it is weak or not. Right? I only have choice. How am I going to benefit from it? You may say that, no, I will not even read it. That's okay. Don't read it. But if you're going to read another hadith, how are you going to benefit from that another hadith? That's the point. Okay? So again, the point is not to say, okay, we as a Sunni or we as a Shia, we as a whatever, we trust all these hadith and everybody has to trust them as well. That's not the point. The point is you should know how to benefit from narrations. And when you know that, even if you come up with a narration that is being said weak, because you are so concerned about having a relationship with Prophet, I mean, if you are concerned, you would say, okay, let me read it. Since I have these principles, I may even benefit from that. There might be some truth in it. And let me try to benefit, take guidance from that. You may even say that in the later stages. But even before coming there, again, it's not the problem that you trust this hadith or not. When you trust the hadith, how are you going to approach? Does it make sense?
Yeah.
And like in terms of like to the extent that I'll just reiterate, follow up with Brother Birkan's comment, like to the extent that I'm concerned about getting to know the Prophet, I would be even delighted to collect the smallest grain of information somewhere. Like, let's say imagine yourself, you are trying to follow the footsteps of a person, or let's make it even like a crime movie. Like there is a murder somewhere, and you're trying to find who is the murderer. In this case, the tiniest evidence you will find somewhere, you will try to put pieces together to get the answer. So even if there's some sort of a suggestion, whatever is coming, you will consider, apply your principles there to extract some meaning out of it so that you can arrive to the conclusion, rather than looking for, oh, no, if the evidence is not 100% clear, I'm not going to touch it. Like you wouldn't do this. Likewise, when it comes to getting to, if to the extent that I'm concerned about getting to know the messenger for personal reasons, because I'm in need of guidance, then I would say whatever I can make of it, I will try my best. So there's this collection in there. And as we will talk about, collection is coming from human narrators. So even if everything was perfectly coming, still human factor is there. But on top of this, there could be fabricated and this and that. But whatever is there, how can I make most out of it rather than being dismissive and to play safe, get rid of everything? Because this is what is ending up happening nowadays. And I am concerned about finding guidance for myself. And how do we do this? This is why we will be reading examples. Like in the light of people who were able to extract meaning from there, we will try to make our best. There is something that's not clicking there. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just still thinking if it's fabricated, then it's not coming from the Prophet then, right? So why are we taking out a principle that it's not even related to Prophet?
So, I mean, we will see an example of this, as I said, and the author will say that, first of all, this doesn't sound like a hadith because there seems to be a sign. So he will say this doesn't sound like hadith because it seems like there is a sign of Israeliyat on it. But he says, if it is hadith, then this must have been what Prophet meant out of it. Because still there's a possibility that it is coming from prophetic narration. So it doesn't mean that we couldn't disprove that it's not his speech. But if it is his speech, then this is what he would have meant. How do you derive this then? Because our general idea is Quran is there, it's unknown. Prophet will come and explain me what Quran is. Like we take it only one direction. But the way author was mentioning when we were studying, when we first started prophethood, how did he say? He said there are three teachers that teach us about our Creator: the book of universe, the prophets, and the revelation. So there are three teachers, and we are not sitting before one teacher exclusively, which takes us to the second teacher. Actually, we are going through these three teachers all together. So you will read Quran. Quran will establish a perspective to you about the existence, about the prophet. Then you will go to existence. You will realize that, oh, it is confirming Quran, confirming what prophet says. You will go to prophet. He will tell you something which is going to be in line with the creation and the Quran. So you are going to be making a tawaf among these three teachers, and you will be growing with them. This is why your understanding of Quran will teach you how to understand prophets, and your further understanding of prophet will teach you how to understand Quran. So it's not one way. It's going to be this spiral, like learning experience. So this way, it shouldn't sound like, oh, I thought we were going to understand Quran by listening to prophet, and now that there are certain narrations who are being disputed, then I am doomed. If this linear way of thinking gets in, yeah, we are doomed. But it's not the fact. Like practically, we are living in a life where the universe itself in the first place tell us about our creator. Quran tell us about our creator. Then narrations is part of Sunnah because they're also living examples of generations of people. So like the narrations are alive in the sense that the prophetic practice is embedded into culture to a certain extent as well. So these are our reality. It's not simply 2 + 2 = 4 type of a very clear, if the prophet's narrations are the only, no, it is not the case. There's a comment? No? Okay.
I didn't have a comment, I just have a question about the paragraph. I feel like I have the questions that like are most evident, right? Like, what exactly does it mean? They open the door to the reason, but do not take the will from the hand. And then in the sentence after that, what does it mean that this position, like whole, would remain equal to one like diamond?
This is giving, it's interesting that he starts with this principle. What he's saying is prophets' words are going to be about certain topics. It's going to be like metaphorical sort of sometimes. Especially he gives the example of signs of the doomsday. What else he said? Like Mahdi, Sufyan, like these matters. He's saying that these are topics. If what prophet says is going to be, oh, Mahdi is going to be Birkan Tunç, he's going to live in 25 in Philadelphia, and his house address is this. If you see the guy, follow him. Like this would defy the purpose of guidance, because the guidance should be that it should open the door to intellect, but should never take away human's choice. Still, you have the choice. You're shown a way that you can make sense of the truth, but the truth is never going to take away freedom of choice from your hand. This is why when prophet spoke, he spoke along with this method of guidance. Does this make sense? So same thing applies with even the miracles of Prophet ﷺ, or all the prophets. They show the miracle. It opens up a door to their intellect, saying that, oh, it looks like this guy has something to say. But it never took away freedom of choice from their hands, so much so that even those who witnessed a miracle in the first hand, they said that, oh, Muhammad's magic affected the skies too. Yeah, so Creator leaves the room for people, if they want to deny, they can deny. Okay. So Sufyan is Dajjal within the Muslim community, like the way it's expressed in Hadith narrations. So he mentions, there are 2 Dajjals that are mentioned. One is like a humanity's Dajjal, and then there's going to be a Dajjal within Muslim community. So that's named as Sufyan also. So that's why he's saying that the prophet's explanation of Dajjal, and today I was looking at, for example, narrations about Dajjal, many of them are in Bukhari, like saying that there's going to be written like kafara in his forehead, and everybody would know that he is Dajjal.
Kafara, kafir.
Kafir, like as if the Creator is saying that it's going to be written here. And if you look at it, you will know that he is Like if you read it like this, like somebody writing kafara here, like you would immediately spot the guy.
And it has to be from Arabic.
Yes, so that it's going to be kafara, right? So now, but in the first principle, he's saying that Prophet speaks in a way that it's if you are searching for truth, you can find truth from there. But and this is a general principle, not only for Prophet here, because Quran is saying that everything in the universe is a sign, right? But how many people are believing? If with stars, Allah was to write Allah in the sky, like there are those, what's it? Constellations, like another constellation which just puts together in Arabic, writes Allah in the sky. Like then you would say, well, it looks like there's something there. Everything is a sign of the Creator, but it's not taking away your freedom of choice. Still, people can say that and saying that, oh, it happens by chance. Sure, if you don't want to, so it's not taking away. But he's saying that the purpose of this is, like it is in my data structures class, like I give hints to students in problems so that they put the effort, and if they are trying to solve it, they can solve it. But of course, I wouldn't like to ask the question and then give them the answer. They wouldn't learn anything. Like this is against the purpose of teaching. Teaching cannot work as such, right? So that's why he says, when Prophet speaks, Prophet follows this principle of opening the door to the reason, but do not take the will from anybody's hand. Let them make their choice so that education is going to take place. Okay? So this being said, if I read a hadith narration and it's not being like 100%, I haven't seen anybody who has written kafara in their forehead. Like, what does this hadith mean? No, whatever narration comes, whatever verse comes, I will need to consider it from this lens. This is the number one principle. Any question, any comment about this? Sounds clear? Okay, so rereading second principle. Yes.
She also asked the second part as well, which was
This position like call.
call and yeah,
So what's a disposition here that's like coal that would look like diamonds?
So like when two students take data structures, you are sitting in the front row, listening everything, like putting all the effort, and there's a student at the back of the class. And during the exam, I put you together in the class. An exam itself is a learning experience, right? As the exam about to finish, I open up the PDF of the solution in the slides and say, okay, why did you just write the answers and give me the papers? So what happens? Like your potentiality is being killed at this moment because the other person is becoming equal to you. Then you say, well, what's the point of studying then? Like it really kills the purpose of education. A coal, like the lazy guy sitting at the back, and a diamond, the guy who's sitting at the front, is becoming equal. So which defies the purpose of education. And this is why I don't like ChatGPT. Because it's really making the coal and the diamond equal. I mean, if it used good, it would be useful, but yeah. Second principle, there are various levels in the matters of Islam. If one requires certain proof, for another, the prevailing opinion is sufficient. Others, like other matters of Islam, require merely assent and acceptance and not to be rejected. In which case, secondary matters or particular events in time, which are not among the bases of belief, do not require certain compliance and definite proof. It's sufficient just not to be rejected and to be submitted to and not to be interfered with. My take from this one, if I may, or do you have any questions or comments before the next? Sometimes what's happening is, oh yeah, Sister Zari.
might have been something we talked about last week about questioning versus criticizing. But for me, I guess requiring like assent and acceptance do still, for me, is still equivalent to having some level of like certainty or conviction, which I guess is it saying like you can be certain, maybe not certain, but like convinced of something even without the like, certain proof. I don't know if
I was lost for a second about microphones. If you can repeat for that.
Yes, this might relate to the questioning versus criticizing comments from last week, but I was thinking that like matters that require it isn't merely assent and acceptance and not to be rejected. Are those still not things that you need some level of like some level of evidence or confirmation before you can say, I accept this or I agree to this. So maybe it's not, I guess I'm not sure what certain proof is really
Mhm.
in this paragraph.
I see. So, like my understanding here is, I might be wrong. I should start with this. I might be wrong. My understanding here is certain matters are worthy to be seeking conviction to the end, all the way to the end. But there are certain other matters which he mentions here as masail far'iyya, like the detailed topics. They are not the basis. So for those topics, you wouldn't be as cutting the smallest detail, trying to find all the details, because it's not such a central matter. So in such matters, as far as I understand here, saying that it's okay if you understand it superficially, or you rely on, I don't know, Prophet's mentioning of something and accept it on this end. So that should be sufficient. Why is he saying such a thing is more of a question in here, so that maybe I can relate to where this is taking us. Like such as the examples he gives is the signs of end of times. So is it exactly like this? Is it exactly like that? Like these type of details. The important part is there going to be an end of times? This is the basis. This is the fundamental part. Would it be in this way? Would it be that way? These are the details of the unquestionable truth. In terms of its details, if it happens this way or that way, doesn't make a huge difference. So I say that this narration says, as such, so be it. In terms of when it comes to details, I am fine with it. But when it comes to this earth coming to an end, my life coming to an end, because all of them are related, and when Quran talks about end of times, when Rasulullah talks about end of times, then I say, yes, the core is unquestionable, and this is the thing that requires certainty. But when it comes to its details, either way is not as important. Sometimes we are missing the point and make a fight over these details, or even sometimes we dismiss because we do see some discrepancy about the details. As I was looking into, again, narrations about Dajjal, like there are very similar, let's say 5, 6, 7 narrations, and details are differing. One could argue that when seeing this picture, like, is it like this or like that? Why are you make 7 different narrations about the same topic? Or the other one could be, the big picture in here is there's going to be a Dajjal. Is he going to be this tall or this short, like the details of it? These details are not the core of the matter. And just go with the big picture get the bigger message. In terms of details, it's not as important. This is where others merely require assent or acceptance or not to be rejected. This is sufficient for your guidance. But making a fight because of the differences could lead to rejecting even the bigger message due to discrepancy. So I think this is what the point is trying to be made here. Okay, there's a comment.
I have a quick question just to clarify like everything. Are these like what are these principles pertaining to? Like specifically about like how we should take weak hadith? Like how we should
In general, all hadith.
okay.
But he's going to give certain examples, but it applies to all hadith, how you would approach hadith, so that you will extract prophetic guidance and prophetic practice from those narrations. I mean, in general, we do this, again, at least for myself, speaking for myself and seeing people around me. I mean, if this doesn't apply to you, just leave it to me then. But what's happening nowadays is people's convictions are being harmed by hadith narrations or differences in narrations and whatnot, rather than, or everybody is extremely benefiting from hadith and then we are having conversation on top of this. I don't think this is the case. The case that we are in right now is, now that the knowledge, because in the old days, and by old days, I mean up until 200 years to now, scholars were speaking, education was oral. Now that education is widespread, books are everywhere, people are reading, and today ChatGPT gives you the answer in a single sentence, you feel like you're an authority. And in this environment, our position is more so being like, how am I going to benefit from this? Because there's risk of harm rather than like, the question is not about benefit nowadays. So the author in here is saying that, no, you should benefit and how you would benefit from them. And if you are not able to benefit because somebody is muddying the waters, just step back. Like beginning with the second principle, even with the first principle. In the first principle, he said there would be like this metaphoric language for that purpose. In the second one, he's saying that there are going to be differences in the details, but as long as the main message requires certainty, but details might differ. So don't, what do they say? Throw the baby with the bathwater. So details, just say, okay, that's enough. It could be this way, that way, but do not deny the certain message at the core just because of this. So he's teaching us in general methodology for how to benefit. Okay. So third principle, in the time of the companions of the Prophet, والسلام, most of the Jewish and Christian scholars entered Islam, and their former knowledge became Muslim along with them. Some of their former knowledge, which was contrary to the truth, was imagined to be a part of Islam. So in this case, within narrations, you will find something which is part of a Muslim scholar, but he used to be a Christian scholar, a Jewish scholar from the past. And his opinions converted to Islam with them too. Now, like this is how it happens with any one of us in here as well. If you are coming from a physics background, a biology background, a computer science background, you give examples with data structures, you give examples with biology and whatnot, trying to convert my knowledge into a Muslim knowledge. Like the person was coming from a Jewish tradition, Christian tradition. In their books, they do see stories, and Quran narrates story, Prophet says something, and then thinks that, oh, this is what it looks like from his previous knowledge, and then narrating or adding some stuff from his previous knowledge. Like this is not with ill intention. This is as we are doing it. So, but it's not always being a proper interpretation. So, and the author is saying that sometimes within Hadith narrations, you will find such like traces of such stuff as well. So when reading it, if you can spot them, you will filter them out. Doesn't mean that throw it away altogether because I found some sign of something wrong there, but filter it out. This could be the source of it. Okay? Because if the approach is, no, it has to be purely clear as if I am listening to it, tape recorded from Prophet's mouth. So this is what the author is saying, actually. It's going to be hard to find such a thing because narrator is a human being. And in this case, with the third one, we started talking about narrators, right? Narrator is a human being, and they will sometimes bring their previous knowledge with good intention, but then you will need to filter out this part of it, not throw everything out altogether, but you will say, oh, maybe this portion of it might have been creeped in from their knowledge.
It's funny that you mentioned tape recording, video recording, like writing a grant proposal in which we are studying the distortion in video recordings. Even with the video recordings, not everything is
Preserved.
to the, yes, the reality. So, but it doesn't mean that we don't use them as data source. We just try to correct them, learning the principles to correct them and understand from them and use them as the source of the knowledge. Also, this principle, the one we just read, we can extrapolate to other sources as well, other than narration. As you said, so even when we read Quran, for instance, what we do, we have certain worldview, certain principles in mind about how to see the creation. And we read an ayah and say that, oh, yeah, it's the same thing my physics professor said. Or it's the same thing, I learned at school. Instead of trying to understand, get the guidance from Quran, we try to interject our preconceptions into Quran, right? Especially when it comes to the social matters. That's how we read ayahs. We come with certain worldviews. What is family? What is man? What is woman? What is children? Whatever. And then try to understand ayah or interpret ayah based on these preconceptions. So same applies to narrations. Another, I guess, the way we take it, which is very relevant, and we should be honest to ourselves. Like every time, especially when it comes to such matters, the Prophet, around the Prophet, we cannot leave our cultures aside. Just like the scholars, when they were listening Prophet, when they were narrating Prophet's actions, they were not able to put their cultures, previous cultures aside. We do the same thing. We say, oh no, I'm from Pakistan. We only believe these and that sources. I'm from whatever, the Turkey. That's the only source that I will rely on. Why? Because I'm from Turkey. Right? We cannot put, again, what the Prophet is, what the narration is, what is reliable, what is not reliable. It's usually not about the content, not about the principles. The question is not, let's be honest to ourselves again. The question is, most of the time, not how am I going to benefit from it. The question is usually, oh yeah, well, from what culture it is, in what culture the narration was highlighted. As if somebody says, oh, it's from, the Persian culture, the Shia sources, whatever, I would say, who cares? What are you doing? Like this, the author, it's very interesting, not in this text, but in many places. So in Turkey, like where he lived, the stance against Shia is so strong. He knowingly and on purpose talks about some sources, but he doesn't talk about many books, right, in his writings. But he talks about Jevshan, which is coming from mostly Shia resources to our culture. And he's doing it on purpose. As if saying that it's a valuable content, right? And if your culture is preventing you benefiting from that, it is an idol in your life. This culture is an idol that you worship. Get rid of it. Don't get rid of the narration or the content. Get rid of your idols. And then, if you can benefit from the content, benefit from it. If you cannot, don't. Content-wise, if it is fabricated, as rather, what is your name?
Arsenal.
Rather was saying,
It's old age, sorry.
if you cannot benefit, don't benefit from it. But your approach cannot be approach of labels. Or Sheikh something said it is fabricated. Everybody say one hadith is fabricated and another, like if it's talking about different, these sects, whatever. Everything, one sect says this is solid, sound hadith, another sect which says, no, all of them are fabricated. What are you going to do? Like, what is the word fabricated there? And the other way around, you will call other sects narrations that they are all fabricated. Again, technical stuff, like if you're a scholar, if you have the knowledge, time, instead of spending all your time in learning a new the programming language, if you are about to learn this science of hadith narrations, do that. Spend your time. If you want to become an expert in these technical matters, become an expert and help us all. But otherwise, your position should be, how am I going to benefit from this source? And it's not out of the air. So for instance, the ayah, the narrations, again, technically labeled as weak. Technically labeled as weak narrations. He will give some examples. Why? Because he would say it became a part of the belief system that the people who call themselves as Muslim, they for some reason thought that was from the Prophet. The majority of people thought. There must be some wisdom, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't become the matter of the nation, let's say the Islamic nation. The point here, the approach here is not what is the label. From what part of the world the globe is coming from. Is it from Imam what or Imam what? No, this is not the point. The point is that it's in front of me. And it's not like I ask the generative AI to fabricate me a narration. It's from some people. Then I ask a question like, is there anything that I can benefit from? It may be bended on the way, or there might be some truth in it. And he's now teaching us how to extract this truth if it is there. And with these principles applied, all these 12 principles applied, if you cannot still find any glimpse of truth in it, then leave it alone. As he mentioned in the previous principle, not everything is the pillar of the Islam anyway, the belief system anyway. Okay, you don't believe a character like a Sufyan. Okay, not everything. If you benefit from it, you would say, okay, when you read it, you should read it this way to benefit. If you have some strong reasons that cannot get anything out of it, then just leave it alone. Don't make it a war against the narration.
Fourth principle, or any comments, questions about the third one? Fourth principle, some of the words of the narrators of Hadith, or the meanings they deduced, were considered to be part of the texts of the Hadith themselves. However, since men cannot be free of fault, some of their deductions or words, which were contrary to the truth, were supposed to be the Hadith and were pronounced to be weak. So human element, another aspect of human element now author is mentioning, because narration chains are like sometimes 2, 3, 4, I think up to 6 narrators are happening in certain hadith. But as like information is going from one person to another person, even in the first person who is observing the environment and explaining it in their words, like multiple people are observing this discussion, for example, today. At the end of this discussion, if we were to ask people like outside, what was the discussion about? Probably we will get, I mean, more or less main idea would be there, but 20 different narrations about this discussion itself. Oh, Yusuf said this, Birkan said this. Sometimes what I said is going to be mixed with what Birkan said. Like, you're not going to be super careful. Like, these sort of things would happen. But you will convey the gist of the message. But there are going to be some mistakes here and there. And sometimes if you were to say it to somebody else, let's assume what we are discussing in here is so valuable, and later generations would say, well, what did they say? And then you are the first person in the narration chain, and you explain it to another person. Another person might sometimes put their understanding as it's explaining it to the next person, and they would consider, oh, this is what they discussed back then. Sometimes such things might get in the text itself. And as this is happening, later generations would say that, oh, this narration is weak. So now the author is saying that this is another element which needs to be considered. And it's not an, again, ill intention, but it's on your shoulders to say that, oh, this is something to be considered. So if I'm going to pay attention, take this into account as well. And as Brother Birkan was mentioning for the sound, recording of sound and how it needs to be corrected.
Even video.
Even video, like you're taking a picture and you need to correct it. So this is something not far-fetched, like it's not exaggeration. He is trying to get money from governments while they are cutting all the funds, research funds. So it must be something important that Trump is
A lot of money.
Trump is giving money for that. But another example that made sense to me in this regard was from radiology. Like brain images are really grayscale images. You take brain scan, it's a grayscale image. Compared to your iPhone's, I don't know, 16 megapixel images or something, like those images are so ugly. But this is the best you can get without opening the skull to see what is inside. So would you say that, oh, this picture is so like blurry, what am I going to do with this? Throw away, open the skull, I want to see what is in there. Like, would you like to scoop the brain and find where the tumor is? Like, there are so many things that could happen, right? Even opening up it is opening the patient to so many bacteria and whatnot. So you would say in this case, given this blurry image I have there, how do I make most out of it? What are the principles of brain imaging? Given these circumstances, given this type of data that I have, which is representing reality to a certain extent, given the limitations, how do I benefit from that? Now we are talking about a live human being's discussion environment. Like Prophet in his masjid, he lived a life, he spoke certain words, he behaved certain ways, and his observers, multiple cameras were recording. And then those recordings were narrated over time. Every people focused on a different aspect, probably, for the same event. They said, oh, Prophet was super excited. The other one would say, oh, he was a little sad, or like focusing on different aspects of the same event. And then sometimes even further narrators will add their understanding into their narration. And later generations will take it as, oh, this is what Prophet said. So this is why Nursi at some point would say that reading a hadith in Bukhari and Muslim, he specifically uses for these two books, is like hearing it from Sahaba. He doesn't say like hearing it from Prophet. He says it is like hearing it from Sahaba. Like, because those people have been extremely careful. They have 6,000, 7,000 hadith narrated in there. So like they talk about millions of hadith. He eliminated them to say that these are the purest, clearest ones. So Nursi says, reading it something in Bukhari and Muslim is like hearing it from Sahaba. So, which means Sahaba is, you are reading it from this lens. Still, narrator's perspective is in the picture. If the person would have been a scholarly people like Imam Ali, their perspective is going to be different. If it is going to be Wahshi, like the person who murdered Prophet's uncle at some point and then converted, his perspective is going to be different of the same event. You need to take this into account when interpreting it. So this is why after reading these, this shouldn't mean that, oh, this is too hard. No, this is reality of life when it comes to image processing for brain images, when it comes to compressing videos or decompressing videos for our real life. This is part of our life. To the extent that I am concerned about message of Quran, prophetic message, I should consider this. If I read something and like I'm not a radiologist, they show me a brain image and I say, no, I'm not going to get into this MR machine. Just open my skull. You wouldn't do this, right? Just don't do the same to hadith narrations either. Like either put the effort. If you're not going to put the effort, do not dismiss it because there is a huge source of treasure in there. So rather than being arrogantly saying that, oh, those MR like grayscale, even my iPhone takes better picture, this is being very like dishonest in this case. So we are trying to adjust, try to show the same honesty as you show with your brain images versus iPhone when it comes to narrations of hadith. Okay, there are two questions, Natalia.
Then you do think it's up to us to make the effort because it feels hard, but I don't know how practical it is. Like I don't know if I'll read every single hadith ever. Do you still think it's up to us to kind of filter these based on our knowledge? Because it feels like you would have to have a lot of knowledge to be able to, filter all of these and get the guidance. Is there any way, or is it described later, if we can rely on certain scholars, or is that also included in the filtering? Like, is it at the end of the day, is it really up to us?
Very good question. Because practically what's happening, even if you are going through the education itself, like let's say you said that I take this so serious, I'm going to go through the education. Still, you are studying it with certain teachers, right? This is how the tradition of education has been. Now you're getting into PhD program. The first thing you do is you're picking up a professor. Like even in secular sciences, you don't say that I have ChatGPT, I don't need my PhD advisor. Like for everything, you study it with a teacher. So yes, you will have to go through some sort of education with someone if you're going to be very serious about it. And when you're considering a hadith, what I mean by your responsibility is it is the responsibility of the reader, if you would like to take it serious, with your teacher to extract meanings, and this is why he is putting those principles. But as we will come to the 10th, that's why I made the disclaimer at the beginning, author is speaking to lay people such as ourselves. He will say that if something sounds unreasonable in a hadith narration, do not easily dismiss, because this is being our attitude. Rather than trying to understand, we are just willing to dismiss it. He says, give a benefit of doubt to one of those 10 principles that were mentioned in the past. If you don't understand, do not dismiss it. Say that one of these applies to it, and then don't touch it then. Don't mess up with it, because the thing is, messing up with hadith is, practically speaking, messing up with prophethood. And if I am just making it impossible for me to reach out to the prophethood, so don't kill this in your world, is going to be author's suggestion. If you cannot benefit, do not give harm. Like, I guess the bottom line is going to be that. But if you would like to say, okay, I am done, I understood the point, I'm not going to give harm, I'm convinced, I am ready to admit that I am ignorant and I am not knowing, therefore I'm not going to make a comment about it. But arrogance is a huge thing in this age. Like, we have opinions about American politics, Pakistani politics, Turkish politics. We know everything, right? We know hadith as well. Like, this is the level of arrogance that we have today. So once I'm convinced that, okay, I admit I don't know, if you would like to take one step further and now starting to learn, yes, go and study with a scholar. And this is what we are trying to do. Like, Nursi in this case is saying that to your level, I will try to keep teaching you. If you would like to go deeper into this, yeah, then door is open. Yes.
Just a quick question. Is it possible to come across an hadith that if you don't benefit from it, step away from it without that becoming like a turning away from what is in front of you? Because most of the time when I come across hadith and I don't understand what I'm supposed to take away from it, if it's like about a specific practice or giving an end or this then stepping away or not touching it would mean that I'm not acting upon what I'm coming across, right? So I feel like I don't quite understand what it means when we say like, leave it alone.
So maybe this can go back to the second principle? Yeah, the second principle. So, like, to the extent that, like, how central is it that we are talking about? That's why sometimes in this society, this was something that I was super surprised when I first came to the US. In the mosque, everybody, the first thing that they were doing was folding their pants. And if you don't do, somebody would just hit you and say, just fold it. Like, in Turkey, that's not a thing at all. But it looks like people took it so serious, to hear so much so that they enjoy warning you about it as if it is the end of the world. Like, it feels in here that, like, when I were to read it, coming someone from Turkey, I would say, like, what a big deal. But people in here would say, no, it is the biggest deal, like, even more important than anything. So for such matters, which might be, this is why, as we were discussing something on Tuesday, I was saying that if it's not set to stone, sometimes matters of relatively detailed topics, we prioritize them even more than the major topics. So for such matters, if it is becoming a burden, if it's not being super clear to me, and there are two ways before me. Either I will say that, no, this is literally the truth and I will follow it, or I'm having some question marks about it and my ego says, well, just say that it's a weak hadith and discard it, ignore it, or deny it. So in this case, author is saying that do neither. Not do the second one, do not dismiss it. But if it is bothering you or whatever, just say that one of these might be applying there and continue your way. This is why at the end of also Sunnah discussion, we were mentioning that Prophet's Sunnah has types. One of type is mandatory. The other type is strongly encouraged, voluntary. And the third one was adab. And author started by saying that even the pious of the pious wouldn't be able to 100% apply every single sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So keeping these into account, because his suggestion to his students is, he says, in this age, if you do your 5 daily prayers and avoid from major sins, people of this age is going to be saved. This is his attitude. Because like the reality in the field is really unbelief is attacking from every aspect, both ideologically and culturally. Like in this environment, splitting the hair might be a disservice unless you are truly a pious person. I am not. So in this case, put your energy to elsewhere, is what I am reading. This is a very practical suggestion of a, I would say, merciful teacher to common people. So in this regard, if you are not able to be 100% convinced easily, it's becoming a super heavy burden. Either I will say that, oh, it's my burden, I will carry it, even if I'm not convinced I have to do it because I want to be pious. This might be backfiring on me, because I will give an example of that too. Like I have been a super scrupulous person, if you know the word scrupulous, like waswasa. So taking wudu 100 times, I mean, not 100, but I remember taking wudu more than 3-4 times for a single prayer, just because, oh, did I worship perfectly? And I say, no, it has to be accepted. So it has to be correct. I don't want to make it wrong, so I will do it. This is not piety. This is more so like stupidity. Like I am adding such a burden on my shoulders, which is beyond what I can carry. And even in there, what's happening is, under the guise of perfection, there is some sort of even arrogance saying that it has to be clear-cut perfect. Same thing might be applying to certain rulings. I am putting extra effort to the shape while not putting as much effort, half as much effort, or even 1/10 of effort to what I am doing in the prayer itself. So, like, practically speaking, of course, there is a lot of importance. All I am saying is practically speaking. Otherwise, this shouldn't be understood. Don't hear me as saying that that part of Hadith is not important. Not for you and me, is what I'm trying to say here. If I'm not able to benefit from that part of it, leave it to its experts. Focus on something that you can carry, that you can benefit from, and use your energy more wisely in a way that this is what we have been doing in these discussions. Establish a firm conviction, iman, put a lot of effort there. That's why I think author was saying that do your 5 daily prayers, avoid major sins, you're going to be saved. He is also picky about the tasbih that's being made after the prayer. Says, do these. This is a very strong, like important sunnah he mentions among sunnahs. But seeking anything beyond this might not be too practical in this day and age. So he is being a little practical in this case. And I do see where he is coming from. So that's why this conversation right now we are having is not, oh, usulul hadith or like, I don't know, some theology education. This is practically what a scholar digested and presenting to people of our level. Hadith, had a question.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay, you always ask a couple questions at the last 2 minutes, but go ahead. Ask one, we discuss about it, and then we can go with the second question. Pick up your most important question first.
What is the hadith for if we're not going to understand it thoroughly? What is the basis of the hadith being mentioned in our religion? For example, when we say we have to question everything that we've been taught by our parents, most of the hadith or the schools of thoughts are based on hadith. Like if you trace them back, okay, Shia, Sunni, everything, all of them are based on the school of thought of hadith. And if you're saying like if you're a lay person and you don't want to get too into that, you should not study, or you should just pray 5 times a day. Isn't that counterintuitive to what we've been learning from the beginning? Is to question everything that you've been taught, question, and then rebuild your faith from the ground up. And in that sense, I think it's really important to know your hadith, to know what you're believing in and how the Prophet did all of his things, daily prayers, stuff like that. So that's like I am not understanding why Nursi is saying like, okay, if it's like difficult for you to understand this, leave it.
So again, let's reiterate what we discussed for the Sunnah. So he was saying that Sunnah has types. What we have been discussing mainly since the very beginning was matters of Iman. Then we talked about Prophet's other Sunnahs, like drinking water is not the same as how belief in afterlife or belief in Quran. So realize the importance of those priorities. You can observe effects of belief in Creator, belief in afterlife in all actions of the messenger. Agreed. But you're a human being and you have your limitations. So question everything in the first one. This is why in the second principle, author mentioned that not all the matters of Islam require the same level of conviction or same level of certainty. For some of them, it requires a certain certainty, but for certain others, like submission, not messing up with it would be enough. This is a very practical suggestion. When it comes to your parents, relationship with parents, this is a practical question. So again, you can compare it with Iman versus your parental relations. But since in our culture, it's being used quite a bit, like our cultures, Asian culture being like coming from a parent worshipping background, pre-Islam era. Like this is how it had been, especially in Eastern culture. And when Prophet comes, when Quran comes, and Quran mentions treating parents well with ihsan, it's being sometimes mentioned as obey them unquestionably. Then you can pause there and question what's going on in here. But this is different than belief in afterlife. Questioning in here is something relevant. But if you cannot make sense of it 100%, are you going to say that this hadith is totally wrong? Is our conversation now. Because trying to make my point clear here, it's not black and white. Either I have to understand it 100% or I will throw it away. This is what the author is trying to make us avoid from. Yeah.
What is the difference if it's right or wrong and not when you use it? And then another thing.
But you are not able to use it because of your limitation. Look, let's admit this. Since I'm not able to use it, shall I say that it's bad or useless? Or shall I say that I am useless in this regard? That is an important distinction, though, isn't it?
You can say I am useless, but then one can also say that does not exist for me. It's not applicable to me. So
no.
It really exist for me.
So I can say that instead, I can say that I am not qualified. I am lazy. I was working more so for getting into a PhD program. It was my laziness that I didn't make sense of it properly. I wouldn't arrogantly say that, oh, since I didn't study for it, it doesn't exist for me. I would say I didn't exist for it. Like read it from reverse. Why am I being arrogantly and saying that it's my mistake not to put enough effort and then put the blame on the text itself? This is why author started by saying certain scholars who think too highly of their intellect are rejecting hadith. We study mechanical engineering, we study computer science, and we think we are smart, and we think with this intellect, I can also argue against a field which I have no knowledge about. So author is not only talking about scholars of hadith who reject. Nowadays, everybody is a professor of everything. And this is nonsense. And let's take the text to ourselves. So yes, me being a doctor of computer science shouldn't mean that I can talk about as comfortably about psychology. This is what's happening in Turkey, for example. There are biology professors coming from a Muslim background. They come out and start speaking like theologian. Like, what effort did you put there? Like what such a person does is they say, well, there's no contradiction with evolution and Quran, actually. And he talks about quotes a few verses here and there and says, oh, is there anything better? Like, what sort of an arrogance is that? So author is calling us to our senses in this regard, saying that with this arrogance, if you don't understand, just say, I don't understand, rather than saying that, or if I don't understand, it doesn't make sense. And if I don't understand, it's useless for me. I mean, practically, yes, but it's because of you, not because of the text, is what author is inviting us to come.
I understand your point, and I've been a victim of this, like that try to be okay, I can read this myself. But then again, on the same point, then I was saying, like, when you start questioning things that you've learned from your parents and stuff like that, even the different schools of thoughts have different, like, for example, how to pray, how to ask, and then there are different school of thoughts. I'm not going to mention that these, but there are different kind of beliefs that you have to believe in. And I question those beliefs. And the thing is, it's opposite for me. It's not making sense for me. That is why I don't understand. The way you were saying is like, I don't understand. And like, for me, it's like, it doesn't even make sense. Like, how they're praising this belief.
Yeah.
So that's why maybe that arrogant behavior that comes in, that it should be false. Like, the prophet that I know of, that the prophet that I believe in would have never said this. That's where I come from.
I mean, that's good. But as we will see certain examples, as something as seemingly absurd as the earth is on fish and ox. I would say, like, what sort of a word is that? We see pictures of globe from space station. There's no ox, there's no fish. Like, there's nonsense, you can say. Or you can say, if prophet said such a word, from prophetic perspective, what would this sentence mean? This is a totally different attitude. Same thing goes with, like nowadays I am listening a book about slavery in Islam. Like, author is coming from a certain perspective. I have a different perspective from, we had a conversation with Dr. Ali. I'm saying that narrations or verses are being taken from a certain point of view, a preconditioned point of view. I say, yes, if you look from this point of view, it's nonsense. I agree. But why are you looking from this point of view? Why do you condition to look from this point of view? And why don't you say that a prophetic tradition, if uses such a word, cannot use it for that purpose? Why? Because I'm a professor and I decide from which angle to look. This is the arrogance part. So accept your limitation and don't touch it. Don't mess up with it. So in here, author is really inviting us to become humble. This is why one of the points, again, the introduction was important, apparently. So he said, some scholars, while some of the scholars whose belief was weak, but whose egotism was strong, he contrasted belief being weak, egotism being strong. And we know, Nursi, when he talks about Iman, he doesn't mean blind faith. He means conviction. That person, there are certain people, ego and Iman is in competition. So I don't have much of a conviction, yet I identify as a Muslim, but my ego says, I know. Then I read a certain hadith text and I say, it doesn't make sense. So now author in here is saying that, yes, put the blame on yourself, not on the text itself. Put the blame on yourself. This is why he is making us walk through those principles to say that maybe this is where you're making a mistake. Maybe this is where you're making a mistake. So if you see a hadith text and it doesn't make sense to you, he says, go through these principles and see if some of them applies to this text, and then say that, oh, maybe because of this, I couldn't make sense of it. Because I feel like this, I don't know, this attitude in general of arrogance in this age, I'm not talking about anybody specific, in this age is so prominent. And also considering that science has been attacking belief, and science advertises itself as unquestionable truth. And unfortunately, we also accept this as unquestionable truth. We already lost there because of probably inferiority complex or whatever. Then we would like to challenge hadith narrations and whatnot coming from our arrogance. It's in the air like a virus. Like Brother Birkan came in and he was not handshaking with us saying that there are people sick in the home. I don't want to spread the virus to you. There's a virus in the air already of arrogance. author is inviting us to our senses, common senses, saying that see what is at stake when you are having this relationship in hadith in a, as we were mentioning last week, like criticism-like way, trying to find a mistake. This is what criticism means. Questioning, trying to understand the meaning is a separate issue, but arrogance is a problem. Yes. You're quite over time, but sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry. No, no, no.
Go ahead.
We can
Close the discussion. It's 9:10.
Yeah,
My
let's close the
apologies.
discussion.
My apologies.
No, that's okay.
So, inshallah, we are concluding here. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين الفاتحة